Welcome back to our second half of our first class on the grand subject of Viveka. That is, coming to know the difference between the real and the unreal, so that you can detach from the unreal, those things that are bothering you, that are hairs in your ointment, or monkey wrenches in the works of your life, so that you can really ferret out, at least to be able to clearly see these usurpers of your natural peace of mind, and who have kicked the king of the Atman off the throne of your being, and shouldn't be allowed to get away with that. If you want to go to battle about it, then there's a sword we like to give you called Sword of Viveka, or discrimination between all those things that are non-essential, that are crowding into your mind in your life. Some of them seeming quite substantial in your life, but you'll find you're much better off without them, having to think about them all the time. Brood upon them, as we say, because brooding is the worst, at least in its negative form, is the worst waste of time, we like to tell people, so that they can put their mind on at least upon something of a great magnitude like Viveka. These first two great treasures that we saw in the chart that we managed to finish in a fairly full form in the first half. I meant to get beyond that and get more done in the first half, but that's just my big eyes but small stomach philosophically saying. So I told you that I wanted to present Viveka over 4 weeks in 3 or 4, maybe 5 different ways. I wanted to give Viveka as to ferreting out the truth, Viveka in philosophy, Viveka in as its own attribute or tool in practice, that is Viveka in sadhana. And then Viveka in morality would be good to take about that. And so I had planned to put the 10 Commandments next to the 10 Yamas and Niyamas, and next to the Viveka, the Sadhana Chatushthaya, and another set of 10 in Buddhism, these 10, on one chart. But I never got around to it yet. Maybe you'll see that in the coming 3 Sundays of classes. But in the meantime, we can use Viveka the way they do in India, a kind of discrimination that takes one beyond this problem of virtue and vice. Mother's divine reality escapes every soul who thinks virtue and vice is real. So this is a beautiful line in a song, that in order to come to understanding of non-duality, you're going to have to transcend this battle, constant battle between virtue and vice. And we know that's a huge part of religion. That is dualistic and fundamentalist religion that even causes wars and so forth. And we know it also goes on in the human mind. I'm a good boy, I'm a bad boy, tomorrow I'll be a good boy again. And there's constant change of these dualities going on. Dvandva mohena, or deluding pairs of opposites in Sanskrit. And there's words for it there that, again, define it in no uncertain terms, rather than just floating in the Western mind somewhere as some sort of thing that we never bring down to earth and examine. It always gets away from us, and we can never pinpoint it. So you can see Dharmic teachings are really good for just bringing these things down out of the skies of the mind and fastening them to earth, so you can examine them and maybe decide right there and then do away with them while you have them, until they float off again and escape somewhere in the mind. So brooding on that kind of thing, the suffering that comes unseen from karmas that are hidden. You need to be doing things that are more geared to the higher self. You want selfless service so you can get self-realization. It's all about a higher self here. And that is the abiding self. Atman, we are Atman all abiding, is the nice statement in Vedanta. And you have to then know what Atman is, so you'd probably want to find out, and then start discriminating away the anatman, the non-self, which is ego and attachment to changing phenomena. I mean, probably one of the best definitions of it right now is how people are faced with this specter of change through media, war, politics, and everything that's going on. It's just a specter there that they can't help but look at. See, since they can't see Brahman, if they could see the light of Brahman, oh, how sweet, you see, and go towards it. But since they can't see it, what gets in the way is this specter of the world. In this day and time, just capturing all the attention on all sides, and people talking about it, flapping their gums, 24 hours a day about these kinds of phenomena, which Vedanta and Buddhism and other great traditions are saying, you know, that's really just change. That's mutability. That's relativity. And it fosters worldliness, and that fosters ignorance, and that fosters life in hell, and loss of peace of mind. It was known about in Krishna's time. He called it the ninefold road to ruination. So one way out of that has been said that, you know, and championed by Western traditions, is morality. And Vedanta calls that a good start. In the realm of religion, morality is a good start, Vedanta says. In the realm of philosophy, what does Vedanta want you to start with? Yeah, they want you to start with discriminating the wheat from the chaff. So both faith-based and wisdom-based traditions exist side by side and are even fused in India, like four yogas kinds of fusion. And so they've been used to seeing these rivers flow side by side, even worship and wisdom. Bhakti and Jnanam, you know, they've seen these, hey, they flowed beside each other long enough. Hey, look at, they're mingling their waters. But you have to keep looking over several hundred years, you see, to see that. As it doesn't seem that way according to the conventional priest class. No, this path is the only path. That path is the only path. It happens in India too. And great souls have come to try and deter that way of thinking, get people out of that narrow thinking into a more universal kind of thinking. Open up, accept, be flexible, and not narrow and tight. So in terms of morality then, we should look at jujikai, a nice Zen word that has to do with these precepts that you take on in Buddhism. I mentioned in the first half that I was going for years into prisons as a part of my service to humanity and thinking what will happen, because the Swamis actually asked me to, the Ramakrishna order. So I thought, well, what will happen if I put Vedanta into the minds of those people? The good thing that happened, I can say, was that they had lots of time to study. Because my students here that I was giving the Vedanta to outside of prison, they didn't have that time. So I came to realize there were two prisons here, one inner and one outer. And sometimes, in some ways, it was better to be in the inner prison. You got your freedoms taken away. There was a lot of problem with the guards and officials and all the things you had to put up with. But left to your own devices, you didn't have to go to a job 9 to 5 or 7. What do they call it nowadays? 24/7, yeah. So you did have some time, and I heard prisoners actually say that to that. Some got out and said, I think I'd like to go back in. So I'm not just making all of this up. Of course, most people would want their freedom. But so then the best of both worlds would be have my freedom, but also do my practices, you see. So that there's a sword there, or a shield. I mean, Divine Mother, we just got through with Navaratri, the 9 Durgas, 9 avatars of Durga, and they're all holding, with 10 arms, they're all holding these various weapons: sword, shield, spear, arrow, wine cup, skull, mala, and all of these have great symbologies to them. So then when we look at precepts, that's why I got on this thing with the prison, is that I would go in there and they'd be teaching people Vedanta. He said, well, the Buddhists are also here, so they wanted me to take the precepts. I said, great, Buddhism and Vedanta get along well, are really the same thing in many ways, out of the same country. So go ahead, take the precepts, and the vows, and go ahead and do those. So you can see here, when we go through them quickly, that they're good. They're things that are good for you. Like I said, if you put them next to the 10 Commandments, or if you put them next to the 10 Yamas and Niyamas, you'd see a lot of correlations, but you'd also see some deeper grooves being run by, say, the Yamas of nonviolence. I mean, thou shalt not kill next to ahimsa, seem to be pretty much the same thing, and can be described that way or defined that way. But you could see that if you study ahimsa, then it's more like thou cannot kill. It has this side to it that admits the eternal existence of the soul. So sinning in killing, or sinning or sinning in not killing, because you were supposed to, according to your government and so forth, you're against that dualism, right? That duality right away. But to know that there's a third doorway out of ahimsa, that you can go to a transcendental position, and that one who thinks they're killing and the one who thinks they're being killed, they know not, because their soul is never born and never died. You don't have that in other traditions. That your soul is birthless and deathless. Your soul is a body, basically. Arg, it got created somehow by lightning bolts from somebody sitting on a cloud. So you have some real powerful foundation behind ahimsa that has caused great souls to conduct themselves in the world in a unique way that you don't see in most other religions and other cultures. And it's not without its problems, ahimsa. When you study it, it's like Viveka. It's going to take some real deep assessment on your part to see if you can accept the fact that you can go kill without anger and it won't cause you karma, that you won't go to hell for it. You're going to have to be explained by a teacher who's adept in ahimsa how this works dynamically. And it won't make sense to you until you do realize that you're birthless and deathless. You, the real you, birthless, deathless. The real you, in you, there's no worlds, so there can be no armies warring. You see? It's a shift of consciousness you've made to a non-dual state, where none of that happens. Why? Well, didn't we go back to Vivekananda and call it phenomena? It was all changing phenomena. It didn't amount to anything in the end. It didn't mean anything in the end. Only while you were attached to it did it seem to mean something to you, and the meaning was all wrong. You didn't extract the true meaning out of the war. You just went on warring. So my teacher would sit on the podium and say, you Americans better be careful. There's 2 world wars have gone by and a third one's on the horizon. And he very seldom made statements like that. He kept himself completely, he was a monk, kept himself completely out of your life and worldly affairs and politics and all that. He just wanted you to realize the Atman, and that's why what I just said is important. Because if you do realize the Atman, then go where you will, do what you want. Nothing can harm you. Because either nothing exists or everything exists. In terms of the world in Maya, nothing exists. There's no substance in it. In terms of your realization of Brahman, everything exists, because everything is Brahman. So these are the finer dynamics of what you're calling non-duality that you're going to have to figure out in your life of practice, yogic practice, even Vedantic practice if you've seen. And for Buddhism, then, you see it starts very high. So when you look through these, did I read the first quote from Lord Buddha? The sincere practitioner should be watchful over his speech, well restrained in mind, and commit no unwholesome deed with his body. Let him thus purify his threefold avenue of karma, and tread the path made known by the seers and sages. So, there's a path proclaimed by the seers and sages. That's welcome news right away for someone like us in this country. See? I mean, I heard of the saints, and I saw the path they tread, basically faith-based and devotion, and I saw how they suffered and how they attained love for the Lord and so forth. But a wisdom path of the saints and seers proclaimed by luminaries of this caliber, like the Buddha, I'd like to hear about that. I'd like to know about that. So, in order to enter into that, then you have these 10 vows you take. And a lot of people don't know that they have two sides to them. When you take the precepts in Buddhism, they just give you the exoteric. And you don't really do much contemplation, I've seen and heard, on the esoteric side of it. So if you look down at the exoteric, and some of these are key, never take life. Well, let's put that right across from, thou shalt not kill, and the yama of ahimsa, and so forth. And leave it at the exoteric level right now. Never take life. And of course, they mean the lives of insects and all living beings as far as possible. People have laughed at Jainism, for instance, because, don't want to step on anything because you're committing violence and so forth, and you've killed something. But again, Jainism knows that birth and death are unreal, that bodies are not the self. I mean, they've been geared in it 24 generations before Buddha by the Tirthankaras, ending in Mahavir. So Jainism is a very profound, long-lived religion. Sometimes I have a few charts on it and we study it. And so they're keeping their karma to a minimum by not killing things. And they also have rules and regulations about if you kill things unconsciously. So they'll go through that in their scriptures. There's conscious killing, of course, you should try and avoid that. And then there's unconscious killing that'll happen, that anyone will fall into that. Step on a flea or whatever. See? And we wish they'd die just from the weight of a human foot. But this is, of course, then the exoteric side. And the next one also is very much like asteya in yoga, right? It's like the third yama, asteya. Do not covet the goods of others, the Upanishads say. Never engage in stealing. So, never take life, never engage in stealing. And why is this important right now? Because this takes Viveka. There are people who are doing this all the time, knowing that it's wrong. There are people who are doing these things all the time, not knowing it's wrong, pretending it's right. Isn't it? So they're doing good acts of stupefaction and bad acts of stupefaction. That's one of the oldest teachings in India that the seers looked at and went, oh my God, these people think that they're doing good when they're really doing bad. So, in line of understanding that, then discrimination, it takes discrimination to take a vow for that. See, vrata, really huge to the Jains. Vratas are everything to the Jain religion. When you see the truth like we did in Vedanta with Viveka and so forth, for the Jains that was, when I first saw the truth, I took vows. Quick. There's no reason not to. So vrata was a huge thing in life in India in the earlier times. Huge. So it's good that it's still here amongst us. And that it's extant in this day and age, and people are actually going up to it and saying, gee, I think I'd like to try and follow that, even if they don't succeed in it. Never be unchaste or unfaithful. That could mean not just sexually, although that could go with brahmacharya. You see how this really is very much like yamas and yamas again. But faithful to ideals, faithful to gurus, faithful to the path, faithful to yourself. See, it's a kind of unchastity that can go on in the mind. And the mind really is key to all this. You know, when it takes a vow, it has to be certain about this, and it has to be strong and maintain that, under duress even, and under other opinions and various things. It's got to remain steady, stiti. Never speak falsehoods. Well, there's satya, right? I mean, the opposite of satya, asatya. So that's again very much yogic. In fact, it should be mentioned right now that, well, this is Zen Buddhism's way of putting it, and that came much later. That's new kid on the block, but in the time of Father of Yoga, 140 AD maybe, Buddha had already been gone for 500 or 600 years. He was in India's past, and you can see then how Father of Yoga was really very much influenced by Lord Buddha. Because back there, again, there was, Buddhism was very young. It's like trying to find Christianity when Christ was there. There wasn't any, see. So it takes time for a religion to grow out of its founder. And a lot of things happen in those early stages. And some of that is that, oh gee, it's not really quite a religion yet. That means I can enter it, see. I can look at it without abandoning my path or my caste. So there are advantages to slow growth. Fifth is my very favorite, never selling or buying alcohol. It shouldn't even be a part of your life. You know. If you even just say medicinal purposes, that means in the laboratory, when you need to sterilize something, they'll take that medicinal purpose and start brewing it out in the forest, you see. This is my medicine. So there's no way to get around. And of course it's the negative side of alcohol's existence in this world, all the way throughout time, east and west, far outrides any of the benefits it ever could have produced. And it continues on today, too, that way. So in these COVID times, they say, well, they're closing the bars. All of us Buddhists and Dhammas went, all right, something did it finally. We really wanted that to happen, but it took a pandemic to do it. But of course that'll pass and they'll open them again. So people don't learn their lessons. So again, this is a kind of moral teaching. You could get on your high horse and, be a fire darting reformer, as Vivekananda said about it. It won't do any good. So you take it as a vow and you teach it as a vow. You say, oh, if he did it, then I'm having problem with it. Maybe I can do it. You see, it's that way. It's not like, give it up or you're damned kind of thing, which is the downside of fundamentalist religion. So when you get to something like an Indian form of practice here, even the morals are based in higher wisdom, in a higher way of proceeding. The real purpose is, like Vivekananda summated, he said, it's the sin we hate, not the sinner. So he will go anywhere to try and help a person who's suffering at any level of everything, do his best to try and help them. And, otherwise it's like hands off. I've given you everything you need to do, now you have to do it, the rest of it yourself. And as one of the potential problems of a savior is that if people fall so deep into that kind of lost soul kind of syndrome, then it's just only natural that people who should have been exemplars will turn into saviors. My teacher used to say that. He said, in India we don't have saviors, we have exemplars. So you have strong people with character there that have been raised in this kind of teaching with non-dualism behind it. See, I mean, that's made a whole difference That's why India is the mother of religions that she is. That's what they call her. She must have something back behind her that's making her eternal, Sanatana Dharma, that never gets forgotten, no matter how many ages go by. Not just big bangs and one and done. Millions and millions of big bangs, if that's what you want to believe. And there it is, the Dharma with the teachers, right there, on the physical plane, sacrificing themselves in order to bring you to Viveka. See? I mean, this will take Viveka, all of this, won't it? Gee, drinking's hurting me. It's not that hard, see. But if you're weak, and you say, it's hurting me, but I'm going to go on doing it, what can be done for you? You see? Even you know it's bad for you, but you won't admit it and be strong. Or it's like we were talking about at the break here. You know, there are thousands of chains on a suspension bridge. Dozens of them have broken. You know, so giving up drinking would be one of those. So, you know, but there are thousands of more attachments that are keeping you from enlightenment, not just drinking. But you can't get to those thousand, you know, to make sure that they snap, so you can be free, if drinking's in your way, or any other thing that's a habit to you. And say, it's dicey. You say, well, I drink once in a while. See, and so it's not a problem to me. I'm not attached to it. But this is not what this vow is about. You see, if someone sees you drinking, it's like selling it to them. You can actually sell it for money, and you know that's a lot of bad karma you're talking about there. Same with drugs. A lot of bad karma. It's not God who's sitting on a cloud judging you, and the devil's not after you. It's your bad karma for doing that, and it comes around. That's what karma does. You reap what you sow. And everyone knows that. To a certain degree, the conscious people know it better than the others. So these are some of the inner dynamics of even exoteric forms of vows. Never recounting the misdeeds of others. So not speaking of falsehood or a harsh truth, Holy Mother said. Learn to look into your own faults. Don't recount the faults of others. You'll lose your peace of mind if you're talking ill about others. So, and give that up and just stay to your own P's and Q's. She said, if a person does one good deed to me amidst 990 foul deeds, I'll remember him for the one good deed he did. And that's our Holy Mother, Shisharda Devi. Hey Mahamate. So, see a great soul like that, again as an exemplar, how she handled this word, all the backbiting and falsities and gossiping that the ladies were doing around her in her life. And she'd tell them not to do that. They'd go on doing it. That was what they got, the fun they got out of life, criticizing others. Never being selfish with time and money. Never engaging in violence and aggression. So, I mean, short of taking life, up at number one, there's this kind of nonsense. See, I think I'm just going to go around hurting people. That's the way I get my fun. So, and of course I'm not saying that personally, I don't get my fun that way. But that's the way people go about things. I remember in high school, some people that I knew about just went out at night and beat up bums and street people. They were teenagers. They got caught by the police and so forth. But that was how they got their fun. They actually like to go out and find some poor soul and make it worse for them, so they'll feel better. Never slander the three great ones. Let's see, so that's your triple gem, your Guru, Dharma, Sangha. And the three bodies of the Buddha, they call that. Never be a detractor from Dharma, always be a supporter of Dharma, for instance. And reach a high state of supporter. Now, if you look down the esoteric form, it's not a straight across thing all the time, but you could see how they would interpret these teachings of a kind of special kind of morality. You might call it dharmic morality in the tradition. And of course, this has the flavor of more recent Buddhism in it, Zen, which is fairly young. So, and of course, a great experiment, because it went to another country to develop itself. I think even more so than in Tibet, because Japanese people, racially speaking, they're far away culturally from the Tibetans. The Tibetans are very close to the Indians. But you take something that far away from its root country and give it to Japanese and see what happens. That brought out the best of Japan. And Japan, which was having as much problems with wars and religion, but pretty much what they had to rely upon until that came along was Shintoism, which is a kind of ancestor worship. So you can't be left with just that as a religion. That's three-world thing again. So you need something from another country even to come along, and teach you about meditation and non-dualism and samadhi, satori, busho. It's the name for Atman in Zen, is busho. So this is the kind of Buddhism that doesn't have a problem with the self, too. It doesn't collect problems like the Madhyamaka did. And it wasn't criticized like the Hinayana was, to a certain extent. So this was a great thing to have that. That's why our founder, Lexiksen, went and got his ordination as a Roshi in Zen. Got a name, Jikai. So you can see maintaining Dharma almost picks up from where it left off, right? Never failing to seek enlightenment, coveting nothing and being generous, always showing compassion, never denigrating the Dharma teachings. They keep bringing that forward like 3 times now, how important the Dharma is. Always remaining unattached. Here's the Bhranti Darshana side, the yogic side of it, keeping free of false views. And of course, that's pretty much philosophically a philosophical problem. Your mind has gotten diluted, so you're holding false views around religion and philosophy. I mean, unless you've entered into religion philosophy, you're in the world of false views. Politics, war, ancestors, that's all false views. Everyone's got false views. It's a mixed bag. And you hardly can find anyone worth following in that mess. Anyone with higher character, or anyone with any idea that there might be something transcendent of this warring opposites and mixture of opinions. People who think virtue and vice are real will never understand Divine Mother reality. So they have plenty to support themselves with in their false views. But if you enter religion and philosophy, that's, in order to understand and get to the essence of your religion, you have to get rid of false views. That's the most important thing. The best thing to do would be to do that early. This is why you've got the 4 Noble Truths, right? And the 4th Noble Truth is what? Eightfold Path in Sanskrit. Ashtangika Marga. It's like Ashtanga Yoga. It's 8-fold. So Ashtanga Marga starts out with right orientation. See, that's actually what the opposite of false views is, having right view. It's so important to discriminate this, to keep us on track with Viveka. It's so important to discriminate this sometime in your life, earlier the better, so that when you try to do your spiritual practices, you're not up against factions inside of yourself that are non-forgiving. like you can't meditate well, or you don't understand the import of the scriptures, or you can't love or be loved, and all these things that are very crucial to making spiritual progress, which is rare to make spiritual progress. I mean, you're just coming to a vow first. You're just giving Viveka first, but you've still got 12 levels of detachment to get after you got the Viveka. So the getting is good now because you finally got to the source of the whole thing, which is the mind. The world was never the source of your problem. Your mind was. The mind is the source of all problems. It's the beginning of all dualities. It's where the 5 elements and the 5 senses and the 5 tanratras and everything started. It's the origin of all. And to this day and age, how many people know that? How many people ever found it out in other countries? Although India was preaching it all the time. This is we're the mind-only schools. Until you get to that, you're not going to solve any of your problems on any other level. Physical, worldly, emotional, psychologically, religiously, you're not going to solve any of your problems. They're just going to keep coming on you until you get this idea that the mind is the source of all your problems, the dual mind. And if you don't fix the dual mind, it becomes the drool mind. It's drooling all over itself, slavering, like a slavering clam. And all the foul things that come out of the actions of the mind. Deed. Where do you trace deed to? Thought. Where do you trace thought to? Mind. So, thought, word, and deed, you see. I started off chanting today that great practitioner of dissolution who discriminates well connects to the words back to the mind. So we're out here in the realm of words. You see how problematic that is. If you can keep the words dharmic and you can keep the words truthful, that's good. See, the minute you venture from that, it's even friends come to grips, fisticuffs. You see, so words you dissolve them back into their source, mind, and then the mind's looking for some place to put all these words. It's back in your intelligence. You see, it all came out of intelligence, living intelligence, and you lost that somewhere along the way. Whoops, I better go back and find it. Well, I have to be reborn to do that. 3 births, Buddhism says, to get realize your Buddha nature. 3 births. 1, to realize that you're fecked, as the Irish says, that you've got lots of karma. And 1, to do practice to neutralize it. And then another lifetime to live free. You've got to have that free lifetime. Jivan Mukta. My teacher was always speaking about that. It was Jivan Mukta this, Jivan Mukta that, Jivan Mukti this. Beyond the intellectual frame of reference. So from the word to the mind to the intellect, finally it gets to the ego. And from the ego to the witness. By the time you get to the witness, then you're an adept already at looking at phenomena and at discriminating away the unreal. It was unreal anyway, so how hard can it be? How long can it persist? Sri Ramakrishna said, how long can darkness that's been in a cave for 1,000 years persist once you bring a torch in? You see, explorer finds an undiscovered cave, 1,000 years, darkness in there. Has the darkness stained the inside of the cave? Is it real? No, it's the minute you bring the torch in, poof, it's gone. In an instant it's gone, although it's been sitting there for thousands of years. That's the way you have to think about mental ignorance. It's not real. Bring the light of the Dharma in. One instant, it's gone, means one lifetime. Let's not be impractical about this. You have to have that light. What does it avail a man to get a light and then hide it under a bushel? Christ said. So you don't hide it away, you let it shine, you burn it. Burn away ignorance. That's the fire of knowledge. That's living intelligence. Nothing else can accomplish that for you. Not dancing, not singing, not postures, not breathing. So, I tripped on number 7. You see. Freeing yourself of false views, my other favorite. That's my favorite of the esoteric. And giving up all having to do with intoxicants would be my favorite on the exoteric side. 8 says, encouraging all towards enlightenment. And of course, you can do that, says Ram, even before you're enlightened. So it's not like you have to shut up and not say anything until you get enlightened. I sometimes use the example of my practicing the cello. So I was a pretty good cellist. I was a protege in my late teens, won a lot of awards and so forth. So I was a decent cellist. So then I started to think, when will I get my perfection? And then I started to think, oh, never. There's no such thing. It's one of the hard lessons artists have to learn. There's no perfection here. I mean, basically, you've got a bunch of wood put together with glue, and you've got catgut strung across a wooden bridge, and you're pulling on it and grinding on it with a horsehair bow. What do you expect? Perfection out of all that? Or you've got a canvas and a paintbrush and paints and so forth. Here's working with things that are of the earth. But my point for bringing it up is that this, if I hadn't have started teaching people cello until I was perfect, then of course I would have never taught anyone cello. So if you can't have to wait to spread the good news of the Dharma until you're perfect, you probably will never teach it. Maybe you get enlightenment when you're 80 or something. You say, okay, I can start talking now. Come, students. You see, yes, sir. Sorry, I can't talk. So you're probably better getting your enlightenment earlier, and then as a degree of enlightenment, make sure you're clear about things, your ignorance is gone, and then share the teachings with them. The way you got it from the seers and the scriptures, always count on those things. Venturing off on your own, risky, you see at first. And offering clarity to spiritual teachers. I'm sorry, that didn't make sense to me either. Charity to spiritual teachers. Offering charity to spiritual, that's called dhanam in Buddhism and so forth. So the last quote here is, engaging in spiritual practice prior to the initiation and implementation of advised preliminary disciplines results in failure to comprehend the teachings and to act in accordance with the Dharma, to meditate properly and to worship in the right spirit. So here you have this teaching, talk about exoteric and esoteric, this teaching of being very careful how you proceed in Sangha life. And at the same time making sure you're doing everything traditional, following the tradition, so that you are growing yourself. Right? You are returning to your own eternal home. You are realizing your own innate perfection. And be best for you and everyone else if you did that in a swift fashion. That is, not take forever, until you can't be of any use to anyone. So, Vivica in morality, Eastern style is what this has been called. In the time remaining, let's look at this that will warm us up to Vivica that I'll be sharing with you next week, like Vivica in truth, Vivica in philosophy, particularly Vivica in the cycle of birth, life, death, and rebirth. I'm really looking forward to getting to that one. I've got 3 or 4 charts I'd like to show you on that will show you a very hands-on way, how to practice that in your life. How to practice being born. How to practice living. How to practice dying. And how to practice being reborn consciously. How to live a dharmic life consciously, or a divine life, until no life anymore. No more birth from the womb of matter, from me. Only emanation from my Divine Mother, as Ram Prasad sings. No more birth from the womb of matter, from me. So this will warm us up to what I'm going to do next week. That's why it's a good thing to end with today, is how to cut through clouds of false superimposition. It's like cutting through spiritual materialism. See, it's one of the books that was written back in the 60s and 70s that many of us read, that was more Buddhist oriented. So here is the subtitle, The Indispensable Role of Viveka in Spiritual Life. So much so that we've said before, after years of pondering it, that we don't really think that you can have a spiritual life without Viveka. And so that's a harsh statement to make across the board in India and to other religions. But we don't see you having a spiritual life yet. We see you having a religious life, maybe. But a true spiritual life, this is where Vedanta cuts high with its sword. Cuts away all extraneous things, and with no uncertain terms gives you the will and the power to live a divine life. And no one can tell you different. The mind becomes its own guru here, Sri Ramakrishna said. And you don't see that happening with other people. Well, I think I'll become a spiritual teacher. You got to have a badge of authority for that. And there it is. Have a badge of authority, actually it's a sword. See, pull it out, show it to people. Whoa, okay, I believe you. Maybe I'll show you the sword of discrimination next week. But there it is at the top of this chart, you see. On its blade, it's Om Hring, Om Hring Shring, Om Hrim Klim. You see, the three great bijams. And so it cuts through with the power of the word. And the third eye is on the cutting edge of the blade, you see. Cuts away everything dual and extraneous and gives you the vision of truth that I was mentioning at the beginning of the class. Shocks you, startles you, reduces you into submission. So, a quote here by our dear Lord Vashishta. Now we have more compassion for him because his father pronounced a curse on him for the good of the world. And we know that story is quite dear. I read it last half. The appearance of the world, O Ram, because he's talking to this teenage avatar, this great young soul, is due to it being experienced through hundreds of births, devoid of yogic discrimination. That's really all I want to read of it. That one sentence has everything I wanted to say. And so when I found that in Yoga Vashishta, I thought, there it is. That's all that needs to be said. And Sri Ramakrishna then, of course, put it in his own language. He said, by living many lives in Maya, people begin to actually believe that the world is real. It's like he was dumbfounded. What? What do you think? You think this is real here? You don't find a person like that, right? You find a person who are hook, line, and sinker, bought into the world. Everything about it, Even if they're depressed, they're just totally into it. You ever seen pigs wallowing in their own filth? That would be what it would be like for a seer to see people acting that way. Like with alcohol or something, you see. Making a mockery out of high-mindedness with intoxicants. Making an absolute mockery out of it. That you just have to kind of imagine what that would look like to them. Like a father seeing his good son do his first heinous acts, beating up a bum in the gutter or something. I didn't even know that was in you. That's not noble. Let's speak of. So that one sentence has just really got it all. They begin to think the world's real if they don't have this Viveka. So don't leave home without it, is that what we used to laugh about, you see. If you take birth, and this is Lord Vashishtha's teaching, is that there are two diseases. One is rebirth. That's the first disease. And the second is coming into rebirth without discrimination. I love that teaching. I never found it anywhere else but in India. Rebirth doesn't happen in most religions. It's not mapped out. It's not even believed in. It's like kind of left floating somewhere, like this problem with the Western mind nowadays. Oh, there's something wrong here in paradise. Just waiting for it to happen. Phone rings. Now what? Just waiting for Maya to come running at you from all its hiding places. Because I spent some time with a person who was like that. See, phone rings. Now what? It's just waiting, on guard for it. I was thinking it's like the catapult, right? What's a catapult good for? Shooting a cat into space, of course. So you put a cat in a catapult and you throw it, So the way the cat is in space is just screaming with its teeth bared, its claws out, so anything coming at it, it's ready for. And it'll land on its feet, see, and walk away. So that's a good example of people like that. They're just waiting for the next horrible thing to happen, but they're ready for it, you see. But they're not ready for it because they don't have the sort of Viveka. And so that's why we're saying it's just a spiritual life is not it's not an option to get that in Vedanta. It's just not. We've seen bhaktas, we've seen meditators, we've seen selfless service people, we've seen all sorts of people. Other religions, other walks of life, altruists. Where's their spiritual life? What culture has produced luminaries by the hundreds? Where is there even any longing, mumukshutvam, for God? Where is there any love for God over the world, if you just wanted to find it? And you see Sri Ramakrishna, there it is, I found it. That was his only love. God was the only reality. He had realized the Vedanta, the highest in Vedanta. What to speak of yoga and other things. He was there. And what's he called? A natural human being. O mind, return to your own home, your eternal abode. Yeah, he never left it. It was coming down to this earth that gave him heartaches for our sake. So, commenting on one sentence, how important it is. If you think this world is real, think again. How long will it last? What can you get out of it? Is there any substance in it? Or is it really empty? Everything in it's just empty. It's a dream. Dreams aren't real. Wake up. From dreams awake, from bonds be free. Know the truth. Thou art he, thou art she. So you realize your true nature. Wake up from dreams. So people ask me sometimes, what are dreams about in Vedanta? They're about waking up from them. That's my quick answer. There may be some other uses for dreams in other traditions, but for us it's like, we want to wake up right now. And we want to live in insomnia of yoga, ever awake state. Like the Advaita even singing about it, you see. Linga prapancha janusi Nachate me cha Nirlaja manasamidam chavibati binam Nirbeda beda rahitam nachate na mecha Ganamritam samarasam gaganopamoham Ganamritam samarasam gaganopamoham. In just one of his 40 verses in this Chalisa, he sings, the creation of this world and the many worlds was not for our benefit. How could they be when Brahman is beyond them and we are that Brahman? It is the shameful mind that has vomited them out. Unity, diversity, that's not for us. It's not our nature. We are pure existence, wisdom, and bliss, as boundless as the sky, infinite like space. In his various verses on the illusoriness of the world, there are 3 or 4 of them here. So great souls have then sung about this, and they've seen through the appearances of things, using Viveka and Vairagya and Satsampati and Mumukshutvam, and arriving at moksha. Everything that contains, and that grand system of mental sadhana that India proposes you do, that you can do sitting in one place, whether it's for 12 days and 12 nights or 49 days under the bo tree. You'll see everything inside of yourself. That's the point. It's the shameful mind that has vomited all this out. And if you realize that and the emptiness of it, then you can move about it. See? You can move about it without getting attached to it. But to get attached to it, what's that about? Getting attached to unreal things. They would be shocked. You know. They'd have to put a curse on you or something. See? Okay, tell me, what do you feel? Oh, the world is real. I've lived in it hundreds of times. See? Have you gotten Viveka yet? No, what's that? So, it's no different than Christ going along the rivers and saying, you've got life, you don't have eternal life yet. You've got boats and fishes and loaves and nets and wives and huts. Come with me now, I'll make you fishers of men. I'll give you eternal life. They didn't have it. Not even the best of them had it. It was a forgotten thing over 2,000 years or more of Judaism. And it's a forgotten thing to a great extent in India today after 2,000 years of the tyranny of your ancestors. Vivekananda woke to his country, his beloved Bharat, his beloved Indians. What's wrong here? What have you come to? Cried and wept for the condition of people. So in the rest of this quote, if I were to read it, and I did, then there's these 3 things that you can use to alleviate this situation. This is how to cut through clouds of false superimposition with this sword of Viveka. One is the knowledge of truth. And so, of course, discrimination is cutting away what's not true, right? So what's left over, you know, is what's real, what's true, what's beneficial. Badram karnibihi sriniyamadevaha badram pashem akshubiri jatraha. That's all the real that's left over after that surgical procedure you did was enacted by you with this new gift you were given from the Divine Mother. cutting through spiritual materialism, that shouldn't have even ever had to happen. Did you fall that low to where you had to need a different kind of sword to convince yourself that the things that you were attached to are not going to fulfill you? You could have started early on, you see. Oh, Mother, give me the sword of discrimination that you possess, and I'll get the knowledge of truth out of that. I won't have to descend, unless it's by order of Lord Brahma to one of his mind-born sons. Study of scriptures is the means to knowledge of truth. So that's Vidya Shastra, and it goes together with Guru Anushasana, which goes together with Aparokshanubhuti. Very good. So basically you need the Guru. Remember I said earlier in the first half, not Aviveka Guru. That's Aviveka means wrong discrimination. You didn't check that teacher out, or you weren't qualified to judge the value of a diamond yet. You weren't a jeweler yet. Whatever the problem is there, and there are several others we could go into, is that Aviveka Guru is that one who cannot transmit you the truth. There's all sorts of other reasons for that being there in your life. Part of it's your, of course, like bad parents you were born to. You chose that. And the other part is that their own kulyana. They have their karma too to enact. So then what you need, Viveka Guru. So that's basically behind this Guru Anushasana. You find the right teacher, the right orientation was there with that, and then you get Vidya Shastra, not Avidya Shastra, because we were talking at the break, remember the ant selects the sugar from a mixture of sand and sugar at the picnic. So you come back, oh, well, what happened to the sugar I spilled there? You see, oh, it left the sand. So Sri Ramakrishna said that's these scriptures are contained, are a mixture of things. You need a teacher to tell you about that. See? Of course, they're in India, again, specific to it, there are scriptures that don't have sand in them. We were looking for those all our lives, plural. That's what we were looking for, because according to him, that's what you need. Until you hear the truth, you're not going to get that desire for freedom, and you're not going to hear the truth till you find somebody who knows the truth, and they got it from their guru. And if their guru isn't around, or that guru isn't around, you have to get it from the scriptures, from people who realized it and wrote it down. I mean, a lot of people are against the Semitic religions because of that reason, is they don't trust the scriptures, and you can't really blame them. There's a mixture of sand and sugar there, and you have to have somebody come forth, to explain that to you. But you don't have that problem in India necessarily. You've got what's called non-duality, and it's always been at the hub of what India taught. And the proof of the pudding is Tibet. Proof of the pudding is Ceylon. Proof of the pudding is China. Proof of the pudding is Japan. When this religion marched over Burma and Laos and so forth, that the world accepted it on some level. Now, non-dualism actually got to spread by people walking. How is it spread otherwise? A different kind of sword. You don't want to know about it. You're going to take my religion whether you like it or not, and I'm going to force you to. So you lift a sword to spread your religion, but all India did was lift a few feet of a few mendicants, mostly Buddhists. And they walked around and gave the teachings. And great kings fell to their knees before him. You know, we don't really like violence against anything. Okay, well then I'll make my country vegetarian and we'll give up animal sacrifice. It actually happened to Ashoka. All I had to do is hear a few words from a Buddhist mendicant. See, well, that sounds reasonable. Animal sacrifice isn't right. Why are you causing that kind of trouble? You think that the gods are pleased with that? That's wrong orientation. You see. That's bad philosophy. It's obvious because it causes harm, and the precepts say you shouldn't cause harm to anything. Figure it out. It's not rocket science. So the other two, before we end the class here and continue on next week, is practice of yoga is a means to dissolution of mind. So this is another direction that the sort of Vivica takes you in. I'd say non-duality is, you're following the path of Neti-Neti. That's a steep slope, a particular mountain slope where very few venture. To give everything up, discriminate it all away, and make that pitch to the top. Can I do that? Shall I do that? Do I want to do that? Will I succeed? What am I going to need to accomplish it? So I'm going to have to look into my mind and dissolve things. So the question at the break, so Viveka, Ajiropa, Apavada, Vairagam, they almost seem like almost the same thing. But you have to realize that when you take on the sort of Viveka, you have to check it like you would check something on a test. Okay, you got it right, but there's a sidebar that says, here's two things that you can check that you got it right with. Now you can get into the land of Vairagyam. So there must be things still in your mind to detach from, even after you got the sort of Viveka. So the work is just beginning. The work here. Not enough just to say mind-only school is great. I accept it. Am I free yet? You've been living lifetimes of thinking that everything was created by God. You've been living lifetimes thinking that there was a big bang that created everything. You never got right orientation. You never got the truth in your past lifetimes. So now you get it, and you use it, and you start a revolution in the mind. You have a great goal in sight, light at the end of the darkness, and you have great teachers that are exemplifying that, who have realized it. You can't deny it. You can turn against it and go away from it if you're not ready for it, or for whatever reason. You could invent all sorts of things to ingratiate yourself back to the world of the ancestors. But you'll never forget that glimpse you got and that inroad you made to a certain place where you could see the light at the end of the tunnel. So dissolution of the mind would be one of those things that we've taught. I even wrote a small book on it and brought it out. Dissolution of the mind stream, and by sets of fives, using that sword inside of your mind. Cut those away, cut that away, cut that away. It's like Neti-Neti defined for you. Not this doesn't quite do it. I'm weeding my garden. Well, here's what the weeds consisted of that had gave me so much problem all this time. And now I have a sword to cut those down. They're not going to grow again. And finally then, at our last minute, we have effacement of desires, which of course every religion admits that desires are at the basis of everything. Some take the slant that desires are good, that everything in the world came out of desires, and everyone's here to fulfill them. So then we would say, you can think that way if you want, but it's how you go about fulfilling them, and if they can get fulfilled, that we have to take to task. See, can you do it dharmically? Can you do it without killing? Can you do it without cheating? Can you do it without stealing? On and on. Or are you just going to let those things exist side by side with this insight that you have? So, effacement of desires, what would you say? Production of positive impressions is the mean to effacement of latent impressions. Back to Viveka Vairagya. When you get to the Vairagya stage, chart I'll show you next week, then you can see how you can in one lifetime, or if you concentrate according to Swami Vivekananda, you should be able to do this in 6 months. Try this at home, kids, I'm saying here. Try this at home, but have that kind of attitude. But you're beginning to cut things away inside, and you have a tool for it that's working. So now you know that you're making spiritual progress. And guess what? It had nothing to do with what you did outside. Except for the fact that if what you did outside was wrong, was misorientation, then that karma is going to have to be paid at the same time that you're working on your mind. And people run into that problem. They finally got to where the getting's good inside of themselves, and they're making progress, and all of a sudden things start growing up in front of them from karmas that are prabdha, that are of this lifetime. Or maybe some chanchita, that they still have some that are moths rushing towards the bonfire. See, purify me, exercise me. All your bad thoughts, all your misdeeds that hopefully you shouldn't have done in the first place, come rushing forward at that point, as if to overwhelm you, and you have to stand your ground and take out that sword that Mother has given you and cut away all the superfluous, unnecessary, with confidence that it can be done, and reach a state of yogic equanimity in which samadhis and higher consciousness can occur, which will net you your freedom for all time. Om Tachnayo, Om Tachnayo Ravrinni Mahe, Gatung Yagyaya, Gatung Ye Nupataye, Daivi Swastarastu Naha, Swastir Manusebyaha, Urdvam Jagatu Bhesajam, Sangmeastu Date Sangchatushpate, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. O Lord and Mother, may we make a great offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering, and may we always revere you, the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide in balance among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, may peace be unto all. Om.